one of our core values is to change always and always. And the reason for that is that, yes, we're a shepherd for new projects. That means change is going to be inevitable. There's always a moment, every project, where we have to stop doing the old thing and start doing the new thing. And there's a bit of a panic that ensues.
Hello, and welcome to Working Your Way, the podcast dedicated to unraveling the journey of being authentic in the workplace. I'm your host, Sandhya Sudhakar, and my guest today is Angela Damiani. Angela is the CEO and co-founder of NEWaukee, an agency that helps companies and brands connect with consumers through engaging and innovative experiences. They're based out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And she's also a founding partner at NEWaukee, a recruiting and people ops agency. In this episode, we cover a lot. We talk about how she started her business and how it's evolved a lot over the past 15 years into almost a completely different company than where it started, but how it's still rooted in the same core values and mission. We talk about her growth as a leader, owning and embracing her unique style of leadership, and how her company really pushes the boundaries of the way things have always been done in order to provide innovative solutions to brand engagement and talent recruiting problems for the client companies that they work with. In this episode, we're also going to dive deep into how to prioritize lifestyle in your work and how to navigate change more effectively. So let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Working Your Way, Angela. I'm really excited to have you on.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'm excited to get into all of the things, your career, your entrepreneurial spirit. But let's kind of start with NEWaukee, which is the company that you're the co-founder and CEO of. And it started, as I understand it, kind of like a young professionals network, and it has evolved so much over time. So can you talk a little bit about that evolution?
For sure. So we have, a fun origin story. I think when we started, we were all young. So it was really exciting to try to gather our peers. Most of us that were in the founding group of NEWaukee were also new to the city, either because we hadn't lived here or had come back after being away for a couple of years. And our name is sort of what we were meant to do, is help people meet new people and explore what Milwaukee, wanted to be. And so we would, have social gatherings, but then those really led into a bunch of different civic projects, try to make a place more entertaining, more attractive for people like us. And we did that honestly, not with the intent of having a business, but rather as a passion project. And about 5 years in, we got serious about it being a real business and decided we had learned a lot about, how to motivate people to take action, how to really meaningfully engage them, and that we wanted to apply kind of some of those key learnings to the ways in which brands authentically connected with their community. And so now the best way to describe what we do is that we help people either connect to the community they want to be in front of, or if that group of people isn't already congregating for some reason, we help you establish your community. And so we have a lot of the same types of stuff that we've always been doing in terms of it being events and programs and works of public art and creative placemaking as sort of the tactics of what we do day in and day out. But the why we do it sort of depends on which organization has called upon us to kind of help them engage that audience in a new way.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about your team and the work that you all do today. It sounded like to me, your starting place is always, let's do something that's never been done before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is that? Say more about it.
Well, I think, that's the tension that we create, right? With every service-based business, right? We don't make widgets. We need to be offering something that people can't reach on their own. And sometimes that's because the internal team is really small. And so they just need extra bandwidth, right? They need capacity. But more often than not, it's because that team has been trying to get new results, and it hasn't been working. And so we hear that all of the projects we take on have the exact same like tone. It's like, oh, if only people knew, like fill in the blank, then they would take whatever action, right? And so, yeah, people come to us when they're ready to try a new strategy, to put down kind of like the ways that things were always done. And I think our name has a lot to do with that. You know what I mean? Like, and our mission being that we make new possible. Like, people come sort of like looking for, that sense of like sparkliness that is new. But I will say, one of our core values is to change always and always. And the reason for that is that, like, yes, we're a shepherd for new projects. That means change is going to be inevitable. But it's also sort of inherent that, like, that causes people even inbound requests. And we're really blessed. We're a small company. So, like, we basically take anything that comes inbound. We do very little outbound marketing for ourselves. So that means people are saying, like, I want to work with you. I want something new. Please help us change the way we are. There's always a moment, every project, where we have to like stop doing the old thing and start doing the new thing. And there's like a bit of a panic that ensues. And so I always say, like, for our team, they need to deal with their own demons around that. Because, like, even myself, you know what I mean? Like, to start a new process, a new protocol, to have to let go of the way that things have been done. I mean, we've only been around for 15 years, so we can't say like forever, but a decade and a half is a long enough time.
It's a long time.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
If you have feelings, you know, innately, I think as a human being, you have feelings about that. And so we have to be able to deal with our own feelings so that we can be a good steward for that, you know what I mean, change management that needs to take place.
Yeah, it's funny. I volunteer for an organization, and I specifically went in saying, like, I just want a role where, like, someone tells me what to do and I just do it. Because in my business every day, it's like constantly having to like do that bigger picture thinking or really like dig deep. And so I was like, I just want one thing in my professional life that's like push the button, send the email, do the whatever. And so it's funny because it's like, I think we desire, as humans, we desire something that feels secure and stable and predictable. And what you're doing is constantly shaking things up. And so I can imagine it does bring up a lot of things and people. So how do you and your team, I wasn't planning to talk about your team dynamics, but how do you and your team work through those moments of like, oh my God, I just want to check the box, but now we have to take a step back and innovate and think of something new?
Yeah, honestly, the thing we've been talking a lot about lately is like, do you know what RACI is? Right? It's like responsible action rate, or
like decision making.
Exactly.
Framework.
Like who? Like, okay, so we have the client contact that comes in. Who are all the people around that person that are like influencing whether or not this will be successful? And how do we set our point of contact up for success? Knowing that there's like a variety of constituencies, and we work with nonprofits, but we also work with enterprise clients too. And oftentimes those end up having like layers of input or bureaucracy, right? Or there's like a little bit more of a like work that needs to be done before we can actually do the work. And so honestly, we've been just mapping that out for each of our, like up on a board. I don't know, this is weird to say, but literally like, how does our person we work with like fit within like what system, and when are we going to like circle in with these other key constituencies so that like our person doesn't get ambushed, you know what I mean? Trying to shepherd or, you know, make the change that they've asked us to help them make. The other thing we spent a lot of time talking about is like, how do we have empathy for folks who are not in the inner ring, but maybe have like a big opinion? Like, we've had a number of things come through in the last couple of months where I've even had team members say like, well, so-and-so really doesn't get to have a say. And I've had to say, well, technically they're like even more senior to our point of contact, so they get a say. Like, you know, like maybe they're not the person who executed our contract,
when it's client
but like,
work, they always get a
like
say.
They still get a say. And so we need to like, you know what I mean? Yes, they don't know all the details or the, you know, every step of like how we got to, you know, X, Y, and Z by going all the way from A through, you know, whatever. But, yeah, that's been interesting. Like just coming from like a deep sense of empathy for the fact that not everybody's at the same like spot at the same time.
It's funny. You were like, it sounds funny that we map this out, but it's very smart, right? Because it sounds like anytime you're going to innovate, especially with enterprise clients, especially with big corporations, you have to do that stakeholder management and bring everybody along at the right time or in the right ways. And so it makes all the sense in the world.
And honestly, it's analogous to our nonprofit groups too, who tend to have a board, right? And various voices on a board, you know what I mean? And then there's staff, and then maybe like the nonprofit also has some other key constituency, like whoever they're serving. Like that's always the case. Very rarely are we like innovators all their self. You know what I mean? Like that's not real. That's not how any of this actually works.
And so how do you navigate the emotions internally, like on your team? Or do those come up maybe in terms of, gosh, we're making this harder than we need to be, or, you know?
Yeah. Just last week, this happened to me, actually. I was having some and everything's going really well, like exceedingly well. Everyone on the team has been on for a couple of years, so we're in that sweet spot. And I realize this will change because it's agency life and people don't stay at agencies forever.
Always changes.
That's just what it is. But we're in this like real sweet spot where everybody has been with us for at least 2 years. So there's like a high level of communication and understanding, which I'm like reveling in. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I know this is going to change again. But this moment feels so sweet. But my partner of 15 years left in December. And so I was looking around like, oh, wow, it's strange to have everything going so well and to not have him here. And I had a lot of big feelings about it last week. And I actually decided like, I'm just going to feel them. Like, I'm not going to like brush past them and try to get busy. Like, I'm going to actually just like kind of sink down into this, because even though everything between us ended beautifully, and I really cherish, you know what I mean, what we had together, it's still new. And I am grieving it. I'm grieving, you know what I mean, that it isn't what it was. And it has all the rules of the game have changed again. You know what I mean? The way that they always do. And so that's what I try to like advocate for, is like, just move into it. Because it's like anything else, like when you drive into a bank of fog, you know what I mean? Then you realize like, oh, you can still kind of see what's in front of you, even though, you know what I mean? At the outside, it feels like, oh, it's, this solid mass you're not going to actually be able to like get through.
Yeah. It was a very emotionally intelligent thing for you to do, to go through that kind of grieving process. I actually work with clients on that a lot, where it's like, there's an exciting new thing. There's a new chapter. There's a new era of whatever it is. And even though the change is positive, there's always that moment of like, what are we letting go of? What might we have imagined this future to be like with this other thing? And now it's not there, or it's changed. And even though the change is positive, it's still a place
it's not what it
experience
was.
Our emotions. So kudos to you for doing that.
Yeah. I'm not always great at it, but I did just have a chance to practice what I preached last weekend. Yes. Go on some long walks and just feel cranky.
Well, applause to you for doing it in that moment. Whether or not you do it all the time, we're human. So Angela's company motto is change always in all ways. And I want to stop and talk about change for a moment. Now, I could do an entire 50 episode series on change and how it's hard to do or to do successfully in organizations, or how important communication is throughout the implementation of a change and all the human stuff that comes along with it. Resistance to change, feelings of insecurity, worry, and anxiety that change provokes. However, I do want to touch on just one small element right here. Actually, what I'm going to share is one of my very favorite frameworks or tools of all time, and I have used it with so many clients in so many different ways. Now, the main statistic that you'll often hear is that 70% of organizational change initiatives fail. Now, this could be a new system or a process that's getting implemented, or it could be a change in strategy or a restructure that's being implemented to try to drive certain results. Now, often these change initiatives fail because there is way too much focus on the tactics of the change and not enough focus on the human elements of change, like explaining why the change needs to happen so that people can understand and get on board, or giving people the space to process it in order to move forward. Now, anytime there's a change, there will be a transition process that we go through internally, even when it's a positive change or something that we really want. And there are 3 phases to those transitions. There's the ending of the old thing, there's the middle, or what's called the neutral zone, and there's the beginning of the new thing. Now, in the ending phase, there's always this letting go that needs to occur. And again, this is even when it's a positive change or something that you really want. Now, what Angela mentioned was really so smart. It was just very, as I mentioned, emotionally intelligent. She knew that she needed to just feel her feelings about this big change that she had just experienced. Even though it was a positive change that both her and her former business partner felt really great about, she still needed to grieve the part of this change that she'd have to kind of let go. And it could have been the camaraderie of having a peer as a sounding board, or the energy that that person brought into her day, or it could have been grieving the expectations, the aspirations that she had for the future before this change was even an idea. I'm going to talk about this more in the wrap up and how you can apply this idea to changes in your work or life. For now, let's get back to the conversation and dive deeper into Angela's path to becoming a serial entrepreneur. Okay, so let's kind of switch directions and focus on you, which is what these interviews usually do. But I'm so fascinated by the evolution of your business. And I do want to get back to that. But you've been an entrepreneur almost your entire career. And I'm curious, where did that come from? How did that come to be?
I don't know. I always say that I feel like it just like happened to me. I didn't have like a master plan. I didn't like go to school thinking like one day I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I think I'm very stubborn, but I'm also very creative. And so right out of school, I had a job that had like a sales component to it, which I did not care for, mostly because I didn't believe in what we were selling. And I've always been sort of like a mission-minded individual, I guess. But I made my first like big sale and decided like shortly thereafter, like, okay, well, if I can sell this thing that I like don't care about, I can sell something for me. You know what I mean? Like, This is not, it's all the same thing. I just needed to figure out like what I wanted to sell. You know what I mean? And then, yeah, like I said, I met Jeremy and it was early inklings on the NEWaukee front, but it became a project I just couldn't set down. You know what I mean? And then I didn't think like I would be a serial entrepreneur either. The opportunity with Amanda and to set up Nuance came to pass about 10 years later. And I felt like, oh, well, I've already done it once. How hard it could be. You know what I mean? She's so brilliant. I mean, I can't say enough about like how important it is to have like really amazing partners. There would be no Nuance had she not like wanted to go full bore and honestly have like the same kind of values that we had around experience and having just like a very different kind of like high touch candidate and recruitment process. And so I've tried other things along the way. I'm not ashamed to say that there have been other ideas that have come to pass that have also passed on because they were maybe a little bit fleeting, a little bit before their time, or quite frankly, I just kind of bored of them and like moved on. But I think people think of entrepreneurship as like this, I don't know, it is a path, I guess, like less traveled, but like somehow we're special in that way for having like taken it. And maybe because I've been doing this since I was 23, like I can't imagine anything else. And it's been 15 years, but I feel like it's been like 15 chapters. And like, had I chosen to work, and I had an internship in college at Honeywell. Like if I had just like stayed at Honeywell, I probably would have had just as many iterations, like climbing a corporate ladder. And the arc of it feels like, oh, we were doing one thing and then a new opportunity came and it was like slightly adjacent to what we had been doing. And there was something about it that was intriguing to me. So we like stood up a new set of services, or in the case of Nuance, like actually stood up a whole other entity. And so it hasn't been, well, I'll tell you this, it's been interesting to say the least, like very, very fun.
I think that's the interesting thing about your story and how NEWaukee specifically has evolved and then eventually kind of spinning Nuance into a separate entity is a lot of times when people become entrepreneurs, it's because they're working in an industry, they see a specific problem, they start a business to solve that specific problem. But that business is like there, it's intended to be that business for the duration of that business existing. And you started a company so early in your career maybe not having a lot of professional experience in any one thing in particular, but
or no professional experience. That's probably the more accurate way to say it. No professional experience. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I mean about being both stubborn and creative. Is I mean that not like, and I do like to draw, but not in the classic sense of like artsy creative, more like I believe in my ability to create something from nothing. And I've done it enough that I know like what I'm good at and what I'm not, where I need a partner, you know what I mean, or other staff expertise to really do it really well. And I'm stubborn enough not to wait. I mean, even in the origin story of NEWaukee, I guess we could have just waited for someone else to host programs and go to theirs, but it felt like, well, why don't we just do it? You know what I mean? Let's just do it and see what happens. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you're right that most people start like wanting to solve a certain problem or a challenge, maybe one that they've had professional experience with in the past. But I also think like GE's not just making light bulbs anymore, and it's been around for 100+ years. Like this is what it is. You know what I mean? That's what product market fit is like really, thinking that you're going to offer something and then having the market be like, yes, but also could you do it like this? You know what I mean? And so you sort of evolve naturally. And even Nuance, Amanda had been working in recruitment for over a decade, had a lot of ideas about how to do it better. You know what I mean? And wanted to like try her hand at it. Originally, we thought, oh, this is great. Like we'll just have all of NEWaukee's clients now use us for recruiting. You know what I mean? We were already doing brand activations. Like, let's do that. This is the next step. And that did happen to some extent, but we quickly pivoted into IT and engineering because that's like a market need. I mean, there's not enough engineers being graduated, year in and year out. And of course, we do other roles too, but that felt like a specialty that we could be really responsive to. And that, you know what I mean? There was a gap between like the number of, the supply and demand there. And we could kind of like nest our way into that niche.
To me, it's like I hear this combination of versatility and impatience, right? And that's what has caused you to be able to iterate and move and shift to what the market needs and reinvent the company so many times so that even though you didn't maybe have one problem that you knew had this huge market for, you've evolved into that over time.
Yeah.
And I think that's it's really cool. I think it's very unique. And I'm curious, like, I know you said, you're not sure why you kind of just became an entrepreneur right out of school, but if you look back on, your childhood or your upbringing or things, were there indications that you were always going to be kind of like an innovator or someone who's an idea person?
Yeah, I don't think so. It's interesting. I just got asked to speak just last week. I was asked to speak at a local high school to some middle school and high school teachers about what skills they need to be giving kids as a modern employer. And I was wearing the entrepreneur hat. You know what I mean? Like that's like who I was supposed to represent. And I said, I don't know what to tell you in terms of skills for like a middle schooler, but I will say being really curious about how to solve problems, being a really good communicator, not stopping after the first time it doesn't work, like having some like fortitude to like keep going and to iterate. Like those are all things, whether that was like who I am, Angela, you know what I mean, as a person, or just, what I was exposed to as a younger person. You know what I mean? I think those are all the things that I do every day. Like those are skills that I still need to like have a deep well for, because every day there's like new things that need to be solved for. I would say I've always been really self-driven. You know what I mean? So it didn't like take a lot of motivation for me to like focus on school or, that kind of thing. But I don't know that I had like a big sense of what I wanted to be when I grew up. I still kind of don't. I feel like it's still like revealing itself to me. You know what I mean? And I'm looking for what do I think is interesting next, I do have like a passion project currently that's starting to like foment in a way that I'm like, oh no, am I starting another company? Like, is that what this is? Because of course I can't just like volunteer for funsies.
Yeah.
But then I also love
just
it
happens
too.
to
Like
you.
it just happens. Like I'm like, well, I can't stop now. Look how much fun this is. Other people are showing up for it. So yeah. Yeah. Maybe it's just like maybe I'm a platform artist in the end and my like favorite medium is business. I don't know.
Yeah, I love that. So when you look back at your career, whether it's with NEWaukee or maybe it was just at Honeywell, like were there moments that felt like you were not able to really like fully express yourself or be totally authentic?
Well, I would say it took me a long time to kind of like come into my own skin. And that's mostly because I had two business partners early on who were very, very loud dudes. Sweet, kind men, but loud. You know what I mean? And I felt like I don't also need to be making noise. You know what I mean? Like they can be the noisemakers and I'll like kind of be like over here doing the work. And it's interesting now that they're both gone and it's just me, how I want to like take on like owning that. You know what I mean? Because I feel like I was worried actually when my partner left in December that there would be a big impact to the business. You know what I mean? And for nothing else, because business is done in relationships, you know. And there's been no impact to the business in a way that is telling me that like my own sort of quiet, constant leadership is actually like what has sustained us in spite of the fact that I don't have like a big Twitter personality or whatever. And so I think it took me a long time to really like own that and realize that and not feel bad about it. Like I thought like being a leader meant being boisterous and having a lot of like, especially in this town, it's just really easy to be a big fish in a small pond. Like not many people sort of speak up. And both of them did a lot. And I think it got NEWaukee on the map in a way that like we would have been any other little ragtag agency. You know what I mean? Had it not been so. But I don't feel compelled to do that in a way that I used to feel like I wasn't being a good leader. You know what I mean? For not being that.
Yeah, I mean it's all of the bias around there's something called implicit leadership theory and it's basically like when you study what qualities a leader has, what biases people carry around what like looks like leadership. It's the loud, it's the confrontational, it's the fastest to talk, it's the whatever, right? And so we just take these messages in because that's what we see in the media, that's what we hear, that's what we like observe happening. And it's very natural then to internalize that as like, oh, well, that's how I would need to be if I'm a leader. And so I appreciate kind of the journey that you went on around like not even thinking like my opinion doesn't matter, but it's like there's a lot of air being taken up in the room. I'm just not going to take up more. And then kind of stepping into it's okay to lead in your own way, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think the other thing I used to feel really ashamed about is that I don't have a 5-year plan. I still don't have a 5-year plan. And now I feel like I don't care. Like, I feel like who knows what 5 years is going to bring? Like, I feel like I'm on the ride, eyes wide open, excited about like what might be around the next corner and what we might do to sort of like embrace that new opportunity rather than feel like, oh man, I should like know as a leader, you know what I mean? Like where we're headed, what we're doing next. And I just don't feel like that's how it's going to work for me anyway. And I lead a small agency in a small market that's clearly like a lifestyle business. And the question I always ask is like, is this the lifestyle I want to be living? And if not, like we'll make changes. But I feel like the nice part about being small is that can be the expectation of everyone that works for us too. Like if this doesn't like augment your lifestyle or the perception of the life you want to be living, like you don't need to be here. That's what we can offer. You know what I mean? Like how we can compete with a bigger firm or even a bigger organization that maybe has more resources, benefits, and things like that. Like this should be an extension of who you want to be and how you want to be in the world. And if it's not, that's okay too. But that's, you know what I mean? That's the nice part about like having only 10 people here. We can have 10 different individual employee engagement plans because there's only 10 of us.
Expand a little bit on what you mean by lifestyle business. Because I think if someone's in a corporate world or working in an organization, they might not kind of fully understand that.
Sure.
But what does that mean for NEWaukee?
So like, I guess lifestyle business, the other way to put it is like a small business. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that after 15 years, are we really a startup? Probably not.
Well, in this chapter, you are.
Nuance is coming out of its startup like days. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For sure. And I think, there's like high growth startups, right? Like you may be taking outside money. Or even if you're bootstrapping it, like your goal is to grow at an exponential rate. And we have growth goals, of course, because expenses go up every year. And because I'm curious, I'm always curious about like, all right, well, if we were to do this, make this investment, you know what I mean? What would that allow us to like be or do or experience? But I don't want to manage 150 people. Like I like it being 10. And partly that's like, because I don't like managing people. Like I like working with 9 other rock star, amazing, creative, totally inspiring individuals who like push me every day to be my best self. That sensation is like what I'm looking for, rather than having like layers of management that need to like not also be producers. And so for me, that's what this lifestyle really looks like. How do we grow in a way that's like sustainable and fun and piques our curiosity, but doesn't require us to have so much overhead and infrastructure that like we waste our life energy in managing the system rather than like being in the work we want to do.
Have you been in spaces along the way where people kind of project their thoughts and opinions onto you about like, oh, if you took funding, you could do this, or if you did this, you could go faster, and like have to kind of return back to like, what are we doing this for in the first place?
Oh, totally. I'm one of the lead curators for the founder community here in the Midwest, and 60% of the group are those high growth startups. So one of the reasons they join is so that they can get connected to the capital allocators, whether it's, early stage or later stage, and good on them. Like that's you know what I mean? It's a choice to be made, but it's a very different type of business and it's a very different type of stress. And there's like a gold rush energy around it. You know what I mean? Like where it's like, I have to go as fast as possible and like stake my claim and be at the right time, right place. And all of it seems so hilariously fake to me. Whereas I just want to build like an awesome business with really cool people serving like even more brilliant, you know what I mean? Individuals who are trying to solve interesting problems. Like I want to have that sensation more than I want to grow at all costs and get kind of like caught in that race. Or maybe it's because I don't have a plan. Like if I had a plan for like 5 years, then I'd be like, oh yeah, I need to do this faster so I can get to the other side of the rainbow. But I also know that even that is like a farce. Like I'm friends with several people who've recently exited from their startups. And I don't know, man, they don't seem any happier than like before. Like,
yeah,
I just think that is, you know what I mean? Like there is no like end of the rainbow.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I love that, because this idea of like once you get there, you're going to feel like you've checked the box and accomplished the thing and all that.
Yeah, exactly. No.
Right. that moment of like pure satisfaction and success doesn't happen. You just want more, or you feel like you need to do it differently.
And maybe I've experienced it in the reverse. Like there have been moments where like we ran out of cash. And that should be like, oh no, we're failed. We're at the end. You know what I mean? Like, and I still found myself like laughing and I don't know, finding a way to like just get up and keep going, in a way that I'm like, all right, so there's nothing else here to do. Like, this is what there is. So why not like enjoy it along the way?
I really appreciate your mentality, your mindset around all of it, because I do think, especially in the startup world, it can be okay when you take outside money, you now are on someone else's timelines. Or if you want to grow and scale at a certain pace, you have to have trade offs. There are going to be trade offs, right? And so the idea of building something sustainably, really kind of building only to the rate where you don't have to make those trade-offs, whether it's in culture or type of work you take on, or the environment that you get to create for your team, is it's not always the way that people choose. It's kind of anti-hustle culture in a way, and not that you haven't worked really hard. I'm sure you have, right, over this last 15 years. But I just appreciate seeing business models that are kind of going against the grain of grow as fast as possible, as quickly as possible, as big as possible. And it's something that I grapple with my own entrepreneurial kind of vision. On the flip side of what you said, I worked in the corporate world for 16 years, and I had a 3-year plan when I started this business. And then I had to like look at it and laugh 6 months in, right? It's like, that was cute.
It's so cute.
you thought you could make a plan and follow it. Like,
isn't
adorable,
that hilarious?
Throw it away. So I think not having a plan often has to be the way to go. And especially if you had a 5-year plan, like your business would be in a very different place, and you've been able to pivot and go to where the market is telling you they want you to be, and have problems for you to solve. And so I love it. And I relate to so much of what you're saying. And even for me, it's kind of validating to hear. It's like, okay, yeah, it's okay to like grow at a sustainable pace in the way that you want it to happen. Okay, so let's talk about hustle culture and capitalism a little bit. And I'm not going to go into a full rant here, because the reality is we all operate within this system of capitalism. But it is really important to note that so often those around us are creating this false sense of urgency. Or maybe it's even something internal in us that's driving that. It could be the company that you work for, or the investors in your business, or it could be your own past that's driving this kind of sense of scarcity, as if you'll never have enough resources. Maybe you grew up with very little, and internally your system is always thinking, I might end up there again if I don't say yes to everything and move faster or push harder. It's the mentality of always asking what's next and going bigger, faster, achieving a goal, and then immediately saying, okay, what's the next milestone? And now I'm all for growth, but too often we forget all of the other things that we might need to sacrifice in order to grow faster. In a company, this could be sacrificing boundaries or work-life balance. It could be having people work more to get to a goal faster, or working so much that they aren't prioritizing their health. Or the thing that you sacrifice might be the team culture. If we're moving so quickly that we don't have a moment to bond with our coworkers, or to be intentional about how we are working together because everyone's just in their own silo, trying to get as much done as possible. Of course, the financials are the driver of all businesses, but it's important to start asking the question, how will accelerating our growth create trade-offs? What are those trade-offs? And are they actually worth it long term? As we get back to the conversation, Angela shares how she always has her eye on what's next, but in a very different way. I've heard you refer to yourself as a futurist, and I'm curious, like, what does that mean to you?
Well, there's two parts to it. First is like what we're doing for both businesses has been done before, right? So like staying up on what's coming next and making bets on like, what trends are going to actually become trends, I think is important. I think the other piece is I would love it if our customers, our clients for both businesses don't think of us as just providing like excellent customer service. And what I mean by that is like, I have a role open and I'm filling it, right? Like it's like an order being taken, but rather they're coming to us because they see us as true subject matter experts. And a part of that is like being able to see what's coming next, you know what I mean? And having a bold opinion about like how that might impact the project, the client, the environment, whatever it might be. I feel like that's a big part of our job, and how we go from being really great at customer service into like next level consultancy. You know what I mean? Like to be a real consultant, someone that they actually need to go to. And I think that's how we cut through the noise with all of the AI disruption. Like we're using tools just like everyone else, you know what I mean, to make things go faster and be easier and have less friction with the like tangible work product we need to create. But you're not going to be, at least in the short term, able to have the discernment that comes with like many years of experience. You know what I mean? Like the humanity piece of this is still really needed. And so that has been like a drumbeat of ours. I mean, really all the way along. Like, how do we offer something that like you can't get from ChatGPT or any of the other like new apps? Like you need it. You actually
Yeah.
you need a human to help you decide what comes next.
Totally. I mean, especially with Nuance right now, it feels like the recruiting process is so broken. It's so imbalanced. It's the experience of the applicant is pretty rock bottom horrendous right now, I'd say broadly. And
Yes.
so I think it's really important work that you're doing. And I would love to see how, you can reapply some of the humanity and the experience more broadly, because I think a lot of companies need it right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, really, I think the like core of both businesses is how are we changing the way people connect, which I just think, in spite of how connected we are digitally with a myriad of technologies and products and devices and all of that, like people are more isolated than ever and they're looking for more human connection. And so if we can be more human, you know what I mean? Like, yes, use tools. I'm not saying like, let's be Luddites who don't believe that,
Yeah.
the robots are definitely coming for us. But there needs to be like a human element to this that I think we're actually really primed for, given our like ethos and our like values around this. You know what I mean? Like we don't spam people. We don't spam anyone ever, candidates included. Like if we're reaching out, it's because we actually genuinely think there's an opportunity for you, not like blanket, like, ooh, check out this great hot job. You know what I mean? So that means that the work can be slower, but it's way more intentional.
Totally. And NEWaukee being an organization that facilitates connections primarily in person and designs experiences around those connections, I think it's such a good confluence of things. So I'm excited to see you solve this problem for everybody.
Well, we'll be figuring it out together. That's for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah. So as you think about kind of your growth as a leader, as a CEO, as potentially someone who's going to start another business anytime now, what is showing up authentically in your career mean to you?
I don't make like New Year's resolutions because I just feel like I'm never going to read as much as I want to.
Yeah.
Whatever's on that like list, it's like a farcical, to like make that every year. But I do have like a word of the year that I set. That's meant to be like a filter that I look through my professional and personal decisions. And last year, my word was direct. And what I meant by that was like, I'm going to be honest with myself about what I really want. And I'm going to like directly go after it. And it also meant I'm going to be more direct in the way that I communicate with people around me. Like I'm going to not hold back anymore when I have that like first gut instinct. Because in 2022, I could point to like half a dozen times I didn't say it when I felt it. And then like 6 months later, we're like, oh, shit, we got to like fix this mess, And it was incredible. Like best year of my life, incredible to just hold directness, you know what I mean, as my sole focus. That I feel like was probably the first time I ever felt like I'm totally in my own skin, owning, you know what I mean, like who I am, where I want us to go, and not being scared about any of it. Like knowing that like something will come up and I have the power within me to just say it directly.
Did you discover anything as you evaluated maybe like why did you hold back in those moments, or what would it take for you to say the thing? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think I was afraid of conflict. I mean, that's really what it was. Like, if I say something, is this going to cause conflict? And is it easier to like suffer? Like, I'm suffering. It's easier if I suffer than it is to like be direct about what's needed. And it's not. I don't know if I'm just old enough now that I feel like I don't want to suffer. I don't want to. There's just, life is too short, and it's not better for anyone. Like, to just be truly honest. Right. And it's not always like bad. You know what I mean? But I didn't want to, I wanted to just take it on myself, you know what I mean? And deal with like the fallout later. And somehow I just tired of that. Now this year, my word is lightness. And that is because I feel like I tend, because I'm so driven to be, I don't know, like on a nice day, like a bull in a china shop. You know what I mean? Like driving. And I'd like to experience what it is to still be able to move forward and not feel like I'm doing it with leverage and not like exerting myself beyond my physical, emotional, spiritual ends. Which of course, like, has been entirely because of me. Like no, I don't have a boss. Like no one is like, you know what I mean? Forcing me to do it. It's only been me like doing everything through brute force. And I'll say, okay, so like today is the end of the first third of the year. I feel a third of the way there. It's been weird sitting in lightness. Like I can sense my need to like push and my like intention to like just, you know what I mean? Like, let's just go with the current rather than like swim against it. I'm glad I still have 2/3 of the year left. I don't think I've mastered it yet.
I think that's a very fair thing, that in 4 months, you're not going to totally change your approach to achieving things. So maybe hold that with some lightness, that you've got plenty of time and also you don't need to get it perfect.
Yeah.
To me, in that, I hear a little bit of like leaning back and kind of a little bit of surrender, maybe, which I think when you're someone who achieves a lot, and I can relate to this in some ways, it's like letting things happen feels very counterintuitive. So I love the approach of having a word of the year versus making New Year's resolutions or setting a bunch of goals at the beginning of the year that you have to achieve. Sometimes it sets us up for failure more often than not when we set a bunch of goals and then we're not achieving them perfectly. We either abandon them altogether or we make ourselves feel bad for not being perfect. I actually have done a word of the year these past 2 years, and it's really just choosing a word that describes the intention of your year. What quality do you want your days to have? Or is there a theme for the year that you can remind yourself of when you're making decisions? I mentioned this idea in episode 7 with Antonio Garcia, which aired right around the new year. And when this episode airs, it's going to be approaching that kind of halfway point in the year. So it might be a good time to re-listen to episode 7 and check back in with your intentions for 2024, or maybe even set some new ones. And as I mentioned in that episode, in 2023, my word was visibility. And I said yes to a lot of opportunities to be more visible in my business, in my community, in my relationships. And in 2024, my word of the year is consistency. I really wanted to simplify and streamline and do more of the things that I really enjoy and the things that are good for me with more consistency. Now, Angela's word of the year, lightness, is something that can be applied both to her role as a CEO, but also to her day-to-day choices, to bring more lightness into her mornings or her interactions with her family at the same time as bringing lightness into her business, holding things more lightly and being more open to letting things evolve without needing to push them or drive them forward. So if you were to choose a word of the year for 2024, what would it be? As you think about your evolution as a team leader, as a leader of people, what are some of the ways that that's changed the most for you, maybe in the last 5 years?
Well, in the last 5 years, we've really hired people, to be honest with you. That's like the biggest change. We were
That you've become a leader of people.
yeah, super small prior to that. I think at our 10th anniversary, there were only 5 of us. So we've doubled
Yeah.
in size, and Nuance has come online. Nuance is its own group of people. How has that changed? I think it's been like a lot of fumbling in the dark, if I can be honest, mostly because I've been so used to just working with kind of like co-conspirators who are willing to like own a work stream. And so there's been no need to manage anyone. And that's like my ultimate preference, but that's if you have new people come on, like that's not reasonable. You have to like show them how to do things and train them up. I think where I've tried to really focus is having other people be really clear on like why they're here and what it is they want to get out of this experience. Because like I said, I feel really empowered to be able to create that for people, knowing that it's not that hard at the scale that we're at, and I think people really enjoy. You have to be a very independent worker working on such a small team. And I think the people who work for us enjoy the kind of long leash, maybe because I don't love managing people, but also because like everybody has to kind of own their own stuff. You know what I mean? And I think we have a group of people who really enjoy that space. You know what I mean? They're not debilitated by it. They like lean in when they have like, the clear field to kind of like run across. And so I guess the other thing is like, and we do use like PI, we've done Enneagram. Oh, this is a long story, but we also set up our own personality assessment company at one point too. So I feel like we do a lot of self-reflection, you know what I mean? And I'm just really like present to like, what do you want to be? What do you want to get out of this? And if you don't think you can live with the sort of like boundarylessness of this, I don't think you'll thrive here. And so it's also being honest about like what I am as a leader and how I'm not going to have a lot of intense directive. And for people who don't like that, they probably shouldn't join the group.
I mean, I think that makes a ton of sense. It's like when you're very clear and very consistent with the environment that you've created and the way you lead, people can self-select, right? It's like about being honest and transparent with them, which I think not a lot of companies always do. But in your environment, it's like
that's really important. Like I feel like you don't have to be something to everyone. It's okay to own who you are. You know what I mean? It's okay to say like, at this place we work really hard. You know what I mean? I think everyone wants to like kind of like sort of like wash over like, oh yeah, we offer balance. But if you don't offer balance, that's maybe okay. There are people who like will thrive in that scenario. Don't pretend to be something you're not. That's worse than just saying like, this is a super family friendly organization, which means that like people probably aren't going to like get back to you at, after 5 p.m. on a Friday, and if that's, that's not an environment where you thrive, then you probably shouldn't work there.
Yeah. And also great filter for the types of clients that you're bringing on, right? To share those types of things with them too. So
totally.
I think that speaks a lot to just having alignment in all the different ways. But that seems like a good note for us to end on and let you get on about your day, going and leading your team and working with the clients that you work with. But I want to thank you for coming on. It was honestly a pleasure to talk to you. I love talking to people who have really unique business models and are making things work in such an authentic way.
Oh, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you for letting me go on and on about my theories. I hope that's helpful for someone.
I know that it will be.
Good.
Thanks, Angela.
Of course.
I love this conversation with Angela, especially because I always want to highlight stories where people are doing things differently and succeeding. Now, Angela's running a business, actually 2 businesses, in a way that aligns with how she wants to live her life, and she's serving clients in a unique and innovative way. It makes me think of episode 12 with Tiffany Welton, who opened a wine bar, and she's going against the grain to build a business that centers her values and centers the well-being of her employees. Now, part of the journey of going against the norms of the kind of more mentality is to slowly detach ourselves from this false sense of urgency or the attitudes that might be so ingrained in us around, well, this is just how it has to be. Start asking the questions about what am I sacrificing? Or what am I risking by moving at this pace? Or what is the company trading off in order to hit these numbers on this timeline? I really love the work of Tricia Hersey, who is the founder of the Nap Ministry and the author of the book Rest is Resistance. And one of my good friends gifted me this card deck that she created. It's got 50 practices to resist grind culture. And so I just pulled a card and I'm going to read it. Now, the card says, I will unravel from urgency. And on the back of the card, it says, find a comfortable place to sit or lie, and then read these words aloud. I deserve patience, grace, mercy, and care. I deserve to not be rushed. I deserve to be seen as powerful and tender. I am worthy of a slow and connected, rested life. When I act with urgency, I'm ignoring the beauty of what is here right in front of me. I will surrender to the flow of life. I will rest. So I'll link these cards in the show notes, but I think that was pretty perfect for what we talked about in this episode. Now, early in the episode, I mentioned that I was going to talk more about change. Angela told us about how she needed to feel her feelings about the change that her and her former co-founder had decided was the best thing to do, splitting up and having Angela run the business. Now, she had to grow through this grieving process around the change before she could really move forward. As I mentioned before, anytime there's a change, there will be a transition process that we go through internally, emotionally, and there are 3 phases to those transitions: the ending, the middle or the neutral zone, and the beginning. Now, especially in companies, we often focus only on the beginning of the new thing. Maybe it's a new process or a program we're using or a new org structure. We ignore the ending that needs to be processed, and we ignore the neutral zone where a lot of innovation can happen. And this framework comes from one of my very favorite business and coaching resources. It's a book called Managing Transitions. I'll link it in the show notes. And I mentioned before that I recommend it to clients all the time. So in the ending phase, there's always a letting go that needs to occur, even when it's a positive change or something that we're really looking forward to. When teams go through changes, say there's a merger with a new company that's really going to give the business a ton of new resources, or even when an individual goes through a change, say someone is moving in with their significant other, this letting go or this grieving process needs to happen, even if it's something you're looking forward to. It's one of those things that will hang around and kind of muck things up until we allow ourselves to feel these emotions. Emotions need to be acknowledged. And if you're moving in with your partner, maybe there could be some sadness about giving up your independent moments where you just get to make a mess and leave it there, leave the dishes in the sink. Or if you're going through a merger in your company, there may be some sadness about the tight-knit relationships that everybody had in the previous company structure. These things aren't revolutionary ideas, but we often just don't even stop to acknowledge them, or we make ourselves feel guilty for even having the feelings like, oh, I should be so excited and grateful for this change. And so I'm not allowed to have any negative feelings about it. And so we'll deny them or ignore them. So remember, as you approach changes in the future, it's a really important step to acknowledge the very real human emotions, the grief, the sadness, the disconnection that comes with the ending of the old in any situation. If we can make space for this part of the process, the new beginning part will go so much more smoothly.